Welcome to Cloud Realities Live, a conversation show exploring the practical and exciting alternate realities that can be unleashed through cloud-driven transformation. I'm Dave Chapman.
I'm Sjoukje.
And I'm Rob Kernahan.
So we're here for episode 2 at MWC 2024 in Barcelona still. We are at day 3 of the conference though, and there remains a lot going on. So Sjouk, what's standing out for you as we start day 3 of the conference?
For me, I wandered around with Rob on the Expo floor yesterday.
Right.
And we saw a bunch of foldable phones.
Right.
Consumer happiness, that's what that was.
Yeah. We took some pictures from the of the air taxi. That was really great.
It was cool.
And we saw your favorite phone, Dave, sorry. The Honor Magic 6 Pro, which has a 180 megapixel periscope telephoto camera.
180 megapixels on your phone.
Is that the one with the Leica camera?
It's got the big fat array at the back that sticks out a mile.
I might go and have a look at that today.
I truly believe that I actually need that for my fireworks pictures.
You can create, just think of the detail of your digital litter that you can create on the back of that.
Absolutely tremendous
camera.
stuff. Tremendous stuff. Describe the air taxi. What is it? Does it look basically like a drone with a seat on it, or is it like
like a 4-person fit-in, big rotor blade, take off, and they've got a massive screen behind it pretending it's flying through the city.
Right.
It is a massive thing.
So they don't actually make it take off and hover it live on the marketplace floor?
No, it is just sat there. It is a big thing though. It is one of those things you approach, you go, that's a lot bigger than I thought it was going to be.
I would imagine from a health and safety point of view, they've made a wise decision there.
Not to run massive rotor blades on the show floor, Dave?
Exactly.
Can you imagine the paperwork you'd have to fill in?
I dread to, honestly, it would be a new category, wouldn't it? So the thing that really struck out for me, beyond AI being hyper prevalent again, like it is in the vast majority of conferences you go to today, is the use of AI as a support tool for digital transformation. So this phrase, AI-enabled digital transformation. Now we talk a lot on the show about cloud-driven transformation. How does that AI-enabled digital transformation, is that the next version of cloud-enabled transformation, or is it, at the moment, is it just a lot of buzzwords all strung together?
So if you think about it, what is actually the core of digital transformation? We're seeing here the telcos starting to move to become digital telcos, diversification of revenue. We see a wider ecosystem. We talked about bringing cloud-native concepts to RAN and such like. It feels a little bit like it's marketing,
right,
to a degree, because a lot of what digital transformation is about is culture, people, ways of working, transforming your thinking, new approaches to just being as the organization. And so I'm sure AI can help, but fundamentally it's the human that creates that change as opposed to anything else. So I'm on the marketing side of the why it's being said, although there is a thing about it. It's a big tool in your arsenal that you must use to become more digital. So when you think about productivity and you think about efficiency and optimization, absolutely AI is a big part to play in that.
Yeah, for me, there are 2 elements to it that struck me as I saw that. I agree. I think at this point, it is marketing.
Yeah.
But it's interesting how fast we've got to that phrase. Like things like cloud-driven transformation, it probably took 7 or 8 years to get to a point where people were considering that in a way that was going to profoundly change the shape of organizations. And I would argue that we're still in fairly early days of that. And, within about 18 months, we're at a point where AI has got there. So, the sense of acceleration to that point to me is quite dramatic.
Well, we discussed it on episode 1. It was use the cloud narrative to leapfrog and avoid the mistakes of the past.
Yeah.
I mean, we all like to repeat our mistakes, but in this particular one, you can imagine this sector
Not
using
when you've
that
got
learning.
Copilot reminding you constantly of the mistakes you're making.
Remember that mistake you made 10 years ago as you were thinking about X, Y, Z?
I think AI will be part of the cloud-driven transformations. Lots of companies are not into cloud transformations yet, and AI will become a mandatory part of it from now on.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I think that's spot on. I think also there's the big question, probably not for today's show, but there's a big question as well about what does an AI-enabled enterprise actually begin to look like? I think that's a very different shape to a traditional enterprise.
And on a previous live, we discussed that at Envision, if you remember, about are people prepared and ready for the reshaping of the organisation that actually occurs? Exactly. And I don't think many are thinking about how that transformation, that shape people-shaped transformation is actually going to impact them yet. I don't think people have properly got their head around it.
Right. Well, we will certainly be tracking that across the course of this year as we do more of these things, because the speed is huge. But back to MWC, 6 topic areas at the conference that we've been talking about on the shows this week: 5G and beyond, connecting everything, humanizing AI, manufacturing DX, game changers, and our digital DNA. Now, today's subject that we're going to focus in on is our digital DNA. So what the show's referring to when they talk about that is across the ecosystem is being sustainable, being diverse, and attracting new talent and creating talent pipelines that are going to make for a sustainable business going forward. It's something that we are pretty passionate about on the show generally, diversity and attracting new talent and new generations in. And as you might expect, they also talk quite heavily about increasing a more circular approach to operating increasingly sustainable and energy efficient ways. And it reflects that as an industry, telecom is still falling short of UN targets when it comes to sustainability.
Yeah. So I think with that, the angle that we're having to become aware of more and more is how the work is getting done. Right. So in the early days of processing, we just went, cloud, great, just ask for some compute, off we go.
Yeah.
But as AI models come in and ever-increasing compute, that drives a requirement for optimization efficiency, and that's more sustainable inherently.
Indeed.
And so we need to be aware of what systems are doing, how they're running. So I always refer to this as good decisions made early on as possible. And so educating the developer and the architect and everything else about things like processor selection and the language that they're using to build a system can make a dramatic difference in its performance,
indeed,
in the efficiency of it, and then cost and sustainability is a natural byproduct of those good decisions. And so, yes, we have a big architecture and we need to optimize what's there, but it's about everything new that we create. We're more aware of what's going on under the covers a bit more. So maybe we had treated cloud as a thing that we can just say it's a commodity thing a bit more. We just ask for compute, and now we need to make more careful decisions about what we're using.
About the value chains.
And the flexibility is there, yeah? So the choice, the myriad of choice, if you want to get into it, is available. And we can, so we need to start to think about that, and it's driving ever more, we need to think more about what we're doing earlier on in the life cycle, rather than ploughing into the shiny things and make better decisions up front.
Well, I'm very glad to say to talk to us about that today, we've got Mohamed Awad, the SVP and GM of Infrastructure Business at ARM. So, Mohamed, good to see you today. Thanks for making some time.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, well, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at ARM.
Yeah, sure. So I manage the infrastructure line of business at ARM. Infrastructure at ARM is really everything from that onboarding point for data. So think that 5G base station or gateway, all the way through the networking gear into the data center and then HPC. So kind of all the compute that happens within that, whether it's the networking, the storage, general purpose compute, AI, my team is responsible for.
So to right at the heart of the sustainability cycle that Rob was talking about then. And before we dive deeply into that, there's probably listeners that aren't that familiar with the sort of the processor industry, where ARM fits in, kind of what the huge leaps of innovation that are going on in that space at the moment. So why don't you set a bit of a baseline for us? Tell us about ARM, but also maybe give us a perspective on the innovation that's going on in the world of processing.
Yeah, sure. So, your listeners may not have heard of ARM, but they're probably using it right now as they listen to us. So ARM is, the most pervasive compute architecture ever. Over 280 billion devices shipped. As part of our partner ecosystem, includes your mobile phone likely is using an ARM processor, this microphone that we're using, the headsets, your televisions, really devices all around you. We are certainly most well known for mobile phones, and as a 30-year-old company, we really started at the heritage of designing very low power processors for compute solutions which had very specific use cases. And so, our partners, asked us to, and when I say partners, I'm really talking about the semiconductor industry, because we are an IP provider, came to us and said, hey, we're looking for low power processors to solve, low power challenges across the industry. And so we developed those solutions. We provide, IP to those partners who then go off and create, devices for all different use cases. I think what's unique about ARM is that we have historically provided and continue to provide platforms to go service different markets. And those partners then go and develop products for different spaces. About 5 years ago or so, 6 years ago, we started to engage the infrastructure area in a very meaningful way. We had invested in infrastructure for much longer than that, but specifically 5 years ago, our partner said, hey, not only is efficiency really important, which is kind of where our legacy came from, but we need a little bit more on performance.
Right.
And so we launched our Neoverse line, and we've seen a lot of success in infrastructure since then.
So help us understand a little bit about what's the innovation process going on at micro level here. How are you getting to the twice the processing power for half the energy benchmarks? Yeah,
so there's a couple of things going on. I mean, one is just a long legacy of squeezing every ounce of efficiency out of the processor. So when you think about a thermostat or a mobile phone, a device that has to run on a battery and has to run all day long, there are techniques that you use around, the type of instructions you use all the way through to, how you design those CPUs at the microarchitectural level, which are specifically focused on power consumption. So that's kind of our legacy because so much of our heritage comes from that area. What we've done now is we've carried a lot of those techniques forward, and you're seeing that happen, even just in your mobile phone, where the processing in your mobile phone, you're effectively carrying a supercomputer around in your pocket, which is being powered by ARM, but it still has to run on a battery. And so, it's that mentality that our engineering teams over 30 years have just kind of continued to bring forward and kind of leverage in their design. We're carrying that over now into kind of infrastructure class devices.
It is incredible because the discussion around it has almost come full circle, hasn't it? In terms of there was the Moore's law effect that you've probably been dealing with over that period, which is like the race for more and more processing power.
Yeah.
And now the race is on less and less actual power.
Yeah, it's actually both. So, and I think we'd be remiss not to talk about both at the same time. And ARM actually plays a very unique place, occupies a very unique area within the ecosystem, because what we're seeing more and more is you've got this massive influx of data as more and more endpoints come online and add data into the infrastructure. The more data that's added into the infrastructure, the more compute you need to process that data, the more compute you need to transport that data, to store that data. And so there's this massive kind of increase in requirements on the infrastructure. And then at the same time, meaning in terms of compute, there's a massive kind of increase in requirements. And at the same time, what we're seeing is that, you build a warehouse and you've only got so much power coming into it. And so how do you support all that increased compute for the same power budget? And then obviously the sustainability goals and all the rest of it. And so I think all of that is coming together. And what we're actually seeing happen is we're seeing, hyperscalers, OEMs, et cetera, kind of take a clean sheet design. What they're finding is that an off-the-shelf general purpose solution is no longer sufficient to meet those demands. And what that means for ARM is that, and for our ecosystem, is it actually speaks to a specific and unique characteristic of ARM, which is, we are unique in the industry in providing, three things. One, a performant, efficient IP platform. The second is providing that platform within the context of an ecosystem, meaning a software ecosystem, so you can quickly adopt software. And then third, providing the ability for our partners to go off and make modifications and customize it to whatever their specific use case is.
Right.
And so, because we are unique in providing all three of those, that's actually been a lot of the reason why we've seen so much traction. It's the technology, it's the fact that we allow people to go customize and optimize for their use case, and then the ecosystem go with it.
So that third point in terms of partners then and the optimization. Maybe give us an insight, if you can, into the conversations you're having with cloud service providers and how they're adopting this stuff in their platforms.
Yeah, so what we're seeing, like, we see this with partners like AWS and, Microsoft recently with Cobalt, which is their custom SoC that they've built based on ARM. AWS is obviously Graviton. Even NVIDIA, Grace Hopper. In every one of those cases, it's really the same story, which is, hey, they've come to us and they said, hey, we know our workloads better than anyone else, whether that's AI or whatever they're trying to build it for. And, and we no longer want to take a general purpose thing and just use it. Rather, we want to build that silicon in support of the server, which we've already architected, in support of the rack, which we've already designed, in support of the warehouse, which we already have, which has a fixed amount of energy. And so when you start to do things like that, you can start to think about, hey, you can get down to, hey, what are the dimensions of the actual SoC so I can fit an extra one in a server blade so that I can get a little bit more compute in every rack, for example. And do I have the right interfaces to support, the memory and all that kind. And so it's that level of customization that we're seeing. Grace Hopper, they, if you look at what they did, they went from a single CPU supporting multiple GPUs, was the legacy architecture, to a one-to-one mapping of CPU to GPU. What does that do? It gives them memory coherency, so now they can support large language models. So it's those types of customizations that we're seeing more and more.
And it was always the domain that the processor was the processor and we had it. And now we can design in the reverse direction, which gives that flexibility to say, I need this trait from my processor, and you're offering the flexibility in the way we operate and build these things to allow us to do that. So you can think in another direction and get a very specific thing out of the platform.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And a lot of that, and you say it's us, it is us, but it's our ecosystem, really.
Oh yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
And it's an important point because we've built this sort of ecosystem of partners who are now building on top of things like these compute subsystems that we bring together. So we'll bring a compute subsystem together, and we offer that. And a compute subsystem is we integrate the IP and we get it ready to go. And then we hand it off to partners who can then go make modifications to it or invest upon it. So further accelerating time to market.
And it's that right to modify in the reverse direction that supports better innovation.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
you're not just handed a brick and say you've got to use that brick. You say, actually, I want to change that brick because my problem is slightly different. And that's what you've enabled, which is a really important thing about a bi-directional thought process.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you zoom that out and you zoom that out to sort of end user level, whether that's a consumer or whether that's a business.
Yeah.
How do you frame that for those organizations or individuals that are maybe a few steps away from your very deep innovation process?
Yeah, I mean the reality is that when you're as a user, as somebody who jumps on and does a web search or watches a video online, you may not know which processor in the back end is supporting that, right? But what is important to you is that when you make that query, you get the results back in a timely fashion. That the response time and the service level that you get occurs. And when you think about the increased demands on the infrastructure, that quality of service would quickly degrade if these advancements weren't happening. And I think that's the point that, and when I explain it to my mom, that's kind of how I explain it to her. And
that's usually a good window, I think, into
it's like, does my mom get it, right?
Exactly.
Does my mom get it, right? My mom spent, 30 years at TI, so she's a semiconductor person. So she's pretty
she's like an educator.
I don't want to do
There's a family thread here, isn't there?
There's a family thread here. Yeah, there's a family thread here. So.
Wonderful. So to bring the conversation full circle then, let's talk about the sustainability point, because I know you guys have been very heavily focused on that aspect of it. We've touched on it a couple of times in the conversation. Does the sustainability aspect predominantly come from that increased density that you were describing, that within things like the cloud, as a result of the new architectures, you can pack more processing power into more space with a set amount of power around in the warehouse that all of this stuff is housed in, or are there a number of other angles running in all of that?
Yeah, I mean, the sustainability thing is hitting us from all different sides. I mean, one side is obviously, compute is just growing at an exponential rate and we just can't keep up. And so if we don't find a way to pack more compute into the same processing, the thing's going to fall over.
Right.
So there's that. And that's kind of what we've been talking about. But there's also this whole idea of, sustainability goals and, what we're doing to the environment and getting more conscious about that. And, local governments being more, conscientious about, hey, do we really want to put another data center in here because we don't have the power to go support it? And, all of the impact that, these massive sort of compute farms are creating. So, we're really trying to balance both of those things. And there's all sorts of innovation going on within infrastructure right now, both in terms of cooling and in terms of, other aspects to try to keep up with some of these, and just leveraging even sustainable energy, which are all kind of focused on the same problem.
And where do you see it? Where do you see it going in the next 5 years? Because obviously all of the challenges of exponential growth in this space, particularly with the AI revolution. If anything, that's going to create an acceleration, right? So when you look out over the next 5 or 10 years, do you do that with hope because you can see a way through? Or do you do that with a little bit of a furrowed brow because it's like, oh my God, these challenges are huge?
The challenges are huge. Having said that, I am incredibly hopeful, right? And I'm incredibly hopeful because what we're seeing right now is a kind of dawn of a new era where the sort of innovation is just, the reality of the semiconductor industry and computers, it's been relatively stable for, we've been on Moore's law kind of ticking away. And all of a sudden now we've got this kind of new realization that that's not good enough.
Right.
And so what you're seeing is sort of massive innovation across the board. And so I am incredibly hopeful because we are seeing these kind of big advances in terms of the amount of compute we can put into a device, into the amount of efficiency. But it is, it's a big problem. So it's going to require everybody, right?
And and that's the point, requires everybody, because I think, and being one myself in the past, developers are lazy. Sometimes. And
Rob's speaking for himself there.
I was never lazy.
Me always conscientious. But the point is that when we write code, it's rare that we think about functionality first and we don't think about efficiency as we're cutting the code. And I think that point about it's everybody's problem is that's got to go right up the stack. Everybody thinking about efficiency and sustainability, importantly. And that's what I mean by better decisions early on, that other people are going to have to join the fight for getting every ounce of capability and capacity out of what we're using and what we're doing. So, like, developers will have to change the way they think about they write code because it's part of the problem.
It really is. And, I think it's increasingly being realized, that issue right now, but I still feel it's not as big of a conversation as it needs to be.
It's nascent. So when you select a library to do a function, is that library rated as efficient? Yeah, you can take it off the shelf, open source code, or do you write code? Is it actually the best it can be? And that can make a huge difference to the amount of compute that actually gets executed. Because compute was always seen as a cheap commodity thing, and now actually it's very precious. So we need to think differently about how we build systems.
I mean, it's really part of the modernization story that you were talking about earlier, right? I mean, at the end of the day, when developers think about their software, it's about, is the code efficient? Can it run on specialized compute? Is it portable across lots of different platforms because, the underlying compute could change to be more efficient, et cetera? And, is the code itself able to kind of evolve in a meaningful way? And I think all those things are, to your point, it's about the humans kind of thinking about, and keeping that stuff in mind as they move forward, right?
Mohamed, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
Now, we end every episode of the podcast by asking our guests what they're excited about doing next. And since we're in sunny Barcelona at this unbelievably large conference, maybe what you're excited about doing next at MWC?
Well, I'm heading home tomorrow, so after a long week, I'm super excited.
That's peak. That's peak. It doesn't get any better than that.
No, in all seriousness, I have a long day of meetings today. And what I love about shows like Barcelona is it really gives you a chance to meet with all sorts of parts of the ecosystem and just kind of, So
have you been here a number of times at MWC?
I have, yeah. I've been coming here for, well, with the exception of the COVID years, I've obviously been coming here for probably about 15 years.
So a true veteran.
Wow.
Yeah.
What's your observations on the change of the show? One of the things that separates, so with both the show and us as individuals, first time we've been at MWC.
Okay.
And I think the thing that has surprised all of us is how, to use one of Rob's favorite words, how converged it all is. So how much it's not just about the world of telecom. It's very much more holistically around the world of tech.
Yeah.
Has it always been that way, or have you seen that evolve?
I find it's more like that now. It could be some of it's my focus and kind of how I think about things as well, but certainly I do find it's absolutely more like that. I find that it's moved much more into the it's much more infrastructure focused than it was when I first started coming. It was all about the new shiny, mobile phone.
Okay.
I find it's very infrastructure focused now. So, but again, that could be my own bias. I was focused more on mobile phones then, and obviously focused more on infrastructure. But I think there's something for everybody. I mean, like you were talking about, the robo taxis.
There is a flying car here.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't get any better than that.
It's Blade Runner. It's Blade Runner in the other hall.
I've been waiting for the promise of the flying car for about 30 years.
Well, you got one. You got one.
So a huge thanks to our guest, Mohamed. Thank you so much for being on the show. Thanks also to our sound and editing wizards, Ben and Louis, our producer Marcel, and of course to all of our listeners. We're on LinkedIn and X, Dave Chapman, Rob Kernahan and Sjoukje. Feel free to follow or connect with us, and please get in touch if you have any comments or ideas for the show. And of course, if you haven't already done that, rate and subscribe to our podcast. See you back in the MWC reality soon.